多啲街坊入嚟啦，咁我哋咧而家咧就開始啦。咁歡迎各位街坊今晚 join 我哋街坊會大講堂嘅活動啦。我咧就係你哋今日嘅主持啦 ，Marco， 亦都係街坊會入邊嘅義工之一。咁講少少自己嘅背景啦，我就係13年咧嚟咗溫哥華嘅，而家咧就從事金融地產服務行業嘅。咁喺開始之前啦，想提翻大家啦，如果有問題嘅話咧，可以留到最後，我哋都會有 Q&A 嘅時段咧，可以咧邀請大家發言問問題嘅。同埋啦，因為而家咧 Discord 咧有個新嘅方式咧就問問題嘅。如果譬如大家咧就喺電話咧或者喺 desktop 入邊咧右上角咧就會咧有一個咧叫做 show chat 嘅，即係嗰個 chat message 嘅 button 嘅。如果你撳入去啦，電腦咧同埋咧電話咧都一樣噶啦。撳入去之後咧就可以自己打自己嘅問題上去，跟住之後咧我哋咧都會順序咧逐一解答大家嘅問題嘅。如果之後自己問問題嘅話咧，unmute之前咧，麻煩大家都要注意一下自己身處嘅環境背景會唔會太嘈，同埋希望大家注意言辭，抱住人人平等、尊重其他人嘅言論。如果譬如大家唔講嘢嗰陣時咧，麻煩咧就自己 mute 咗自己先，咁咧就唔會嘈到嘉賓或者其他人發問題嘅時候嘅聲音。咁喺開始之前啦，同大家講下免責聲明啦。而今日咧嘅嘉賓所講嘅內容咧，都會係嘉賓專業嘅交流意見同分享，街坊會咧都唔會作任何言論咧作出負責嘅。咁同大家講下街坊會嘅背景啦。唔知道係咪有咩街坊咧係今日第一次join我哋街坊會嘅活動？溫哥華街坊會咧嘅宗旨咧就係連結大溫地區，以自卑斯省新舊香港移民啦，共同組織一個團結互助港人移民社群。同一時間地，大家都係或者咧曾經係做過新移民。希望有經驗嘅街坊都可以幫嚟新嚟嘅街坊落戶，喺卑斯省站穩陣腳、落地生根，同埋希望所有新嚟嘅街坊咧都可以多啲參與加拿大本地事務，融入社區，做個真正港裔加拿大人。所以咧，我哋溫哥華街坊會嘅口號咧就係傳承、接納、共融嘅。咁今日啦，我哋嘅活動咧嘅地點咧位於 Squamish 啦、Tsleil-Waututh 同埋咧 Musqueam 等嘅 Coast Salish民族傳統仲未被割讓嘅領土，所以咧我哋向呢啲民族致謝，讓令我哋可以咧自由咁生活。咁唔再多講啦，而家咧我就今日嘅活動嚟開始啦。首先咧介紹下今日我哋嘅嘉賓 Lilian 啦。Lilian 咧就係註冊言語治療師，係非洲衛生局屬下嘅 Royal Columbian 喺 New West 嘅醫院咧係園藝病理學家，執業領域咧為呢個吞嚥困難症啦，或者咧吞嚥障礙咧同神經系統疾病園藝溝通管理嘅。喺醫院工作以外咧，佢都會幫助咧一啲咧有關於中風嘅人士咧、言語障礙或者減少口音嘅客戶咧提供服務嘅。咁我都唔多講啦，今日咧就請有關我哋嘅嘉賓啊 Lilian 嚟啦。Hi Lilian. Just want to stop my screen so you can share it.
Thank you, Marco. Hi, everybody. Let me just share my screen here. All right, please let me know if there's any issue with visuals. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to talk about accent modification and speech therapy. So we'll begin a little bit about what is speech therapy or speech language pathology and what do we do. We'll learn a little bit more about speech production and then go into some accents and common patterns found in speakers with Cantonese accent. Then we'll go through some of these issues and talk about some solutions for them. Okay. So what are speech language pathologists? Basically, in one sentence, we prevent, assess, diagnose, and treat speech and language, social communication, cognitive communication, and swallowing disorders in children and adults. So let's break it down a little bit more because that's a very complicated sentence. So we help with assessing and treating a person's speech, basically how they pronounce their words. So some examples of this will be helping someone with a stuttering problem or helping with accent reduction. We also work with clients with language difficulties. This is more related to brain function and how the person is understanding language and how they are forming the sentences in their head before it's produced. So some examples of this could be someone who's had a stroke and has trouble forming their sentences or understanding after the stroke. We work with people with swallowing difficulties because we understand those muscles used with the mouth and the tongue and the throat so well that we end up being the experts for swallowing. And these issues are often acquired after a brain injury, such as stroke. And last but not least, we help others with voice. For example, somebody may have a hoarse or a strained or a weak voice. A singer may develop vocal nodules, and a speech therapist can help them improve their voice function. So speech therapists all go through a master's program in Canada, and they have to pass a national exam to practice. And their practice is also governed by the province to ensure that we give good quality care. Speech therapists work with clients of all ages, including preschool, school age, and adults. And we can work in schools, deaf schools, clinics, hospitals, health units, et cetera. And we also work often as part of a team. So with doctors, dietitians, different therapists, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, and many others, different professions. So let's talk about how speech is produced. So we broke it down a little bit and in simple format. So one, we have an idea in our brain and we make a sentence in our head. And then air is exhaled from the lungs and brought past the vocal cords. The vocal cords vibrate to create a sound. And then the mouth, tongue, and your lips and jaw move in a special pattern to create some purposeful speech sounds. So there's a lot of steps involved for speech to be produced. So let's take a closer look at the pronunciation of our words. And there are three main areas that need to occur correctly for the speech to sound right. So first, articulation, the way the lips, tongue, and jaw, and even the way the palate move. Your voice, so the stress or the loudness and the tone of your voice is produced by the vocal cords. And lastly, respiration. We need air from our lungs to push through past all these structures like the vocal cords, the lips, tongue, and jaw in order for speech to come out. So if there's a breakdown of any of these parts, then your speech is not going to sound the way you want it to. So accents are a way the words are pronounced. So this can include both the way the speech is articulated or pronounced and also how your voice sounds. So accents are due to many different reasons. It could be due to your location. So for example, in England, depending on where in England, you'll hear different accents throughout. It could also depend on your class or your status. So for example, in London, you'll hear different accents that distinguish between the rich and the poor. Ethnicity may change your accent, as seen in British versus Canadian English, which is very different. And then, of course, as we all know, the foreign accents are usually from new immigrants coming to another country, to Canada. So in Cantonese, the tone and the pitch can change the meaning of the word. The classic example is, of course, ma, 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 ma. In English, though, the stress patterns are used in the words. So stress is really the combination of both loudness and pitch, which is very different for Cantonese speakers. Articulation is also very different in the two languages. So as you can see, each language is represented by each circle, and they have their own sound bank. So as you grow up, these are the sounds you always hear, and so your brain is used to these sounds. As you can see, Cantonese and English only share the sounds in the middle. So many English sounds don't exist in Cantonese. For example, the th sound, which is a symbol that almost looks like a zero with a line in the middle, that's the sound for th, such as the word three. So Cantonese speakers sometimes can't hear this and will produce a different sound for it. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. So there are many accents heard throughout the Lower Mainland, as you all have probably noticed. We all have accents, even within Canada. So there are subtle accents when you listen to someone from the east, such as Toronto, compared to someone from the west coast. And in Vancouver, the Lower Mainland, the main accent is more the Pacific Northwest English accent, which has really specific vowel sounds. And it can be heard along the west coast of Canada and the US. So if you lived in a different part of Canada, you may be modifying your accent in a different way. So accents are not a good or bad thing. There's pros and cons to having an accent. The benefit of having it is that it says a lot about your identity and where you are from, and that's a good thing for others to know. It's very universal because everybody has an accent, and it tells you about yourself and your location, your culture, everything. It's also can be used as an advantage because it could be a great conversation starter. And to have an accent means that you are multilingual. So that's always a benefit. Some limitations, though, can be that's frustrating when others don't understand you. Others may focus more on your accent than what you are saying. And it may make school, work, and other activities quite difficult. So let's talk a little bit about some common patterns found in speakers with a Cantonese accent. This is sort of the meat of the presentation. So I decided to talk about a few of the more common ones. So the E versus the I sound. So in Cantonese, sometimes the sound is interchangeable. So E as in meat and I as in mit. So to produce the E sound, the front part of your tongue is high in the mouth. You can see the arrow in the picture. Bring your tongue to the top of your mouth, but it does not touch the roof of your mouth. E. And just you can do a little bit of a smile to produce E, meat. To produce the I sound, bring your tongue slightly lower. I. E. I. Our next one here is the A versus the E. So A as in apple, E as in bet. So these two are also often interchanged. I often hear the E sound for the A sound. So we want to bring the front of our tongue to the bottom of the mouth for the A sound. So bring your tongue all the way resting to the bottom, A. So it's a very low tongue position, A. If you have trouble producing that, you can smile a little and say A, apple. To produce the E sound, bring your tongue a little bit higher to produce E. So A and E. Next one we'll talk about is the S versus the sh sound. So S versus sh. S. as in cell, sh as in shell. These are often interchanged for one another. So the s sound, the S sound, the tip of your tongue is raised to the roof of your mouth. And then you push the air through. Don't let your tongue touch the roof of your mouth. It's just raised a bit. And then you push air through. So, and you should feel air come out of your mouth. With the sh sound, the front part of your tongue is raised up towards the roof of your mouth, same as the S sound, except the air passes over the top of your tongue and your lip is rounded. So round your lip together so it produces more of like an O, and bring your tongue up, and then the air passes over the top of your tongue. So it's cell versus shell. With both of these, you're pushing the air through, so you should feel air coming out the front of your mouth. Next one we'll do is the W, L, and R. So the W and the L sounds are sometimes substituted for the R sound, and the R is one of the most difficult sounds to get right. So there are a couple ways to produce this sound correctly. We'll just talk about one way here. The R sound, you want to bunch the tongue back so the tip points up towards the gum ridge. So if you feel the top of your mouth, inside your mouth, there's a little bumpy area. That's the ridge. Okay, so you want to bring your tongue tip towards it, but don't touch it. The air passes over the top of your tongue. So your tongue is almost bunched back like a spring, tongue tip up, air passes over the top of your tongue. R, ray, ray. The L sound, the tongue tip is on the upper gum ridge, so you can touch the upper gum ridge, and the air passes the side of the tongue. L, lay. With the W sound, the lips are rounded, but they don't touch, and the tongue is resting. W, w. Don't let your lips touch, just round it. Way, way. Okay. So ray, way, lay. Okay, next one is the F. Is sometimes substituted for the th sound, what we talked about. So three, three, and free. These ones are actually quite different. The F sound, you want to bring your lower tip under the top teeth. So it's almost like you're biting your lower lip with your top teeth. And then you push the air out. Free. Okay. For the th sound, you bring your tongue between your teeth and push the air out. Three. So with both of these sounds, you're pushing the air out. You should feel the air come out if you put your hand in front of your mouth. Free, three. Okay, I think this is the last one for articulation. The N, N, and the L sound, L, are sometimes interchanged. So the N sound, you need to bring your tip of tongue to the bumpy part of your hard palate. So the roof of your mouth, that gum ridge, that bumpy part. Tongue tip to the bumpy part, and air passes through your nose. N, n. You can bring your finger under your nose and feel that air flow through. It won't be a lot of air, a little bit. N, n. With the L sound, the tongue tip goes up to the bumpy part, same spot. Air passes over the sides of your tongue, not through your nose, sides of your tongue. La, la. N for an N sound, L, L sound. No and low. So the only difference here is how the air passes through. One is through the nose, the other is over the sides of the tongue. Hopefully those were pretty clear. It's not something, if you don't have these sounds, then this is just a really fast overview. Usually it would take quite a bit of practice to learn to move your tongue and your lips and breathe in a certain way. So don't worry if you have a hard time. I also wanted to, oops, oh, you know what? I think I'm missing a slide here, sorry. I wanted to include some information on stress because Canadian English is based on stress versus Cantonese is based on tone. So stress is more both loudness and a bit of change in pitch, not too much. It's a way to add emphasis. Okay, so it's usually placed on one vowel sound. And one vowel sound is usually called one syllable. So sorry, I'm not sure why I don't have the slide here, but basically a syllable is a beat in a word. So if the word is Lilian, li, in, that's 3 beats. And the stress is on the first beat, li, in. Do you hear the difference? It's louder and it's more emphasized. Li, in. So some common patterns for stress include first, formal names are usually stressed with the first syllable. So if the name is Robert, it's Robert, or Johnny, Henry, or Marco. If there is a prefix or a suffix, so things that are added to the beginning or the end of the word, they are often not stressed. So I'm going to find you that slide, maybe towards the end when it's Q&A, because I'm sorry, it has all my examples there, which will be easier to follow with the slide. So let's talk about that towards the end. Let's move on to SLP, role in accent modification. So when you see an SLP or a speech therapist for accent modification, they usually will tell you to identify how you pronounce different sounds by asking you to read a sentence or read a passage and then record that information to analyze your speech. And then based on that, they'll give you some goals and some things to work on. So everybody is a little bit different. Some suggestions besides speech therapy is just if someone doesn't understand you, you can always prepare yourself with a script. So you can say, I apologize, English is not my first language. Please ask me to repeat if you don't understand me. This allows you and the listener to work together and ensure that you are both on the same page. You can also tell people before, and then you can also listen to some podcasts, radio shows, audiobooks in Canadian English to get used to listening to all the sounds. Sometimes we're just not producing the same sounds because we can't hear them very well. So the more you listen to things in English, the more your brain will be able to hear those sounds better. You want to read a bit, improve your language fluency, because in English, sometimes the type of word, the language, will impact how it is pronounced. You can even borrow some books and read some books to specify the American English pronunciation or Canadian English pronunciation, and there are some nice practice exercises in there as well. Definitely talking to people will help improve your language and your speech. And honestly, if you just smile and be sincere, it often compensates for any wrong sounds. So if you have trouble looking for a speech therapist, if you're interested, then here's a website for you. Basically, this is the provincial website for speech therapy, and you can find any professional in your location just clicking on a map. So it's very easy to do. If you have any questions later on for me, there's my email there. There's lots of options for you. You can do a group therapy if you and more people are interested. That's definitely possible, and it will save you a bit on cost. There's also individual therapy, and often insurance will cover both. You can do Zoom or in person. That's the great thing about accent modification. It's quite flexible, and we can do a lot of these things online if you don't want to do in person. So that's about it for me. I'm going to stop sharing and find my slide for you so I could talk a little bit more about stress, because that will be quite interesting. And then I'm happy to answer any questions in the meantime as well.
街坊會唔會有咩問題想問Lilian咧，或者想係話有咩字啊、英文啊，想係即係 pronounce 唔到，或者可能係問下Lilian點樣有咩可以解決嘅辦法咧？可以用中文問㗎，中文問我可以幫你哋其實Lilian都聽得明中文，所以都 OK 嘅。如果想用中文問嘅話。
Yeah, were the examples clear? Anyone have trouble producing any of the sounds that were mentioned?
Yeah, so there's someone actually asking, so when pronouncing Keith, Kenneth, North 等等 th 尾嘅字啦，我聽到夫，但係同時加拿大出世，佢哋聽到佢話係 su。So the
嗰個問題係即係 for words like with th.
Yes.
Ends up sounding like a different sound.
So instead of he's hearing fu, the Canadian board's hearing su.
Okay. I think, let's see. These are shared sounds in English and Cantonese, so I think it will be easy to fix. So fu, like f, fu, your bottom lip goes under your top teeth, and with su, your tongue tip is going up and the air goes around. Su. So I think I would suggest having someone, even a friend, can record some words for you in both the F and the S sound so that you can practice identifying which one is which. It's going to be hard for you to, do you have trouble producing the sounds? Or is it just listening?
Okay. The problem, I guess, is that when listening it, he can listen every single thing is full, and when it listen 讀問題係聽，我聽出嚟全部都係 full。when he listening is actually he can hear every single thing is full instead。街坊其實如果可以 unmute 自己問會比較清楚少少。如果 unmute 嘅話咧，電腦同埋喺desktop 咧都係喺版面上下邊有個掣嘅，你可以揀自己 unmute 嘅。
我諗呢一個問題，可能同讀音有關係啦。即係我唔係話發唔到 FU 同 SU 兩種音，而係我覺得全部都係 TH 尾嘅嘢，大部分都係 SU 嘅音，好少會覺得真係，喂，我大部分都覺得係 FU， 好少真係聽到係 SU。即係可能係聽嘅認知都有些少偏差。
So a good exercise would be if you can ask a friend who can say the words for you with a list of words. So everything is the same except the S and the F. So for example, sun and fun. And then, for example, if I say the word sun, you'll have to guess, is it an S? Is it an F? Sun and fun. Another thing to check is to make sure there's no hearing difficulties. So maybe get a hearing screen if you're finding there's more sounds that are difficult. Oftentimes, hearing difficulties are with higher frequency sounds, such as S and F. So that might be an issue that could solve your problem. If your hearing is totally fine, then I would suggest some practice and just have someone produce the sound and see if you can listen for the difference. It just takes practice sometimes. Answer your question?
Can I ask a question?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to ask if I'm to stay in Vancouver for a few years or 10 years, which kind of accents should I work towards? Because you know, as you've mentioned, there are West Coast accent and also East Coast, more Toronto, and even more Atlantic accent. So which one should I work on?
There are some minor differences in vowels usually. Definitely not the Atlantic accent. That's going to be very different. But the difference between Toronto and Vancouver are very small. So I wouldn't worry too much. Either is fine. But something that is more general, like the West Coast accent is very easy to understand. So that might be an easy one. The main differences are just a bit of the vowel sounds. So I think that would be a good one for you.
So my other question is that what is considered an acceptable accent maybe in Vancouver? Maybe I have a British accent. So is that something acceptable here, or I should work on to have a West Coast accent?
It really depends on how it's impacting your life. I'm understanding everything you say in English. So for me, if it doesn't impact your work life, your social life, then maybe it's not something you need to work on. If you're doing work that really needs you to present or be very clear, then you might want to have a few sessions or practice a little bit to improve your accent for those instances when you have to do something that's important for sounding clear and communicating. But your speech sounds 100% clear to me. There's just an accent. So if you don't have trouble with your everyday life, then I don't really see a need for it. So it's all really personal. It's how you feel.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
So we do have someone asking, so for the R sound, is it always better to pronounce slowly? For example, starting the R sound with the tongue flat, because whatever he or she pronounce it quickly, people just don't understand.
I think the quicker it is, if you have trouble producing it normally, then the faster it is, the harder it is for your tongue to catch up. So you need to practice slowly, and maybe in the beginning is a good idea to speak slowly. But once you have that clear, then you can talk at a normal speed. I would start with doing single syllables or just the R sound. So even like R, practice just r, and then adding one vowel to it. So ra, re, ru, re, and then looking at some simple words. So like real, ray, right, that sort of thing, a simple short word, slowly increasing the length of the word. So something longer would be ripple, Ryan, and then starting to say it in sentences. Don't go too quickly at once because you want to have good quality practice. The more you practice something wrong, the more your tongue is learning it wrong. So go really slow in the beginning is my suggestion.
So I guess also I do have a question for it because like when learning English at the beginning of the time, so when it, like some of the wording have like more syllable to pronounce. So let's say if it have like 3 or 4 more syllable, like for example, overwhelming, or like I don't know, like 4 syllable words. So it's actually harder for Cantonese speaker to pronounce it. Is there any chance that is or any ways that they can have a better way to pronounce those words?
Yeah, I think because your tongue is not used to those sounds, then I would go slower. Slowing down your rate of speech will help. And also practicing some speech sounds in shorter words to make sure it's very strong before you add long syllables to it. That will help. Strengthening the foundation, because if your foundation is not good, then you probably won't have clear speech once you try to speak in sentences or longer words. Definitely slowing down is going to make you more clear. So while you're practicing, if you want to be clear with those long words and sentences, slow down, try to over articulate. So that means moving your tongue, lips, and your jaw a little bit more than you normally would to really get the sound out clearly. So I'll show you the stress slide that I have here. I'm just opening it up if we don't have any more questions in the meantime. Give me one sec here. Okay.
如果街坊有問題嘅話，都可以 unmute 自己跟住答嘅。如果係 YouTube 嘅話咧，就可以text 嗰個 text 呢個問題，跟住咧我哋都可以幫你哋問嘅。
Okay. Hopefully you can see this okay. I'll let it load. Okay, right. So stress. So instead of tone in English, Canadian English, English in general, actually, we use stress. So emphasis or the loudness. So we talked about formal names. Usually, not all the time. English is very annoying because there are always exceptions, but usually any formal name is stressed in the beginning. Madeline, January, Captain, David. So if you stress it in the middle, it sounds weird. January, you know what I mean? Same with like months, January, as I mentioned, days of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, anything more formal or a name.
L'agent du service à la clientèle vous accueillera.
Prefixes are often unstressed. So suffixes and prefixes are basically little bits that are added either to the beginning or the end of the word.
Nous vous remercions d'avoir voyagé.
So if the word is biography or the beginning, the prefix, the special bit that's added, it's always not emphasized. So it's always the sound after. So autobiography, autobiography. Bio is stressed. Same with agree. If there's a dis added in front of it, the next syllable is stressed. So disagree, disagree. Unhappy, unhappy. You wouldn't say unhappy. You say unhappy, or you wouldn't say unhappy. It's unhappy. Same with if something special is added to the end of a word, then the syllable before is stressed. Information, not information, information. Accusation, misdirected. So just some examples of some stress patterns in English, which will really reduce your accent quite a bit. And that's what I had for stress.
Cool. So one of the person have follow-up questions. With the pronouncing R sound, starting with the tongue flat or not?
Like flat?
Yeah, the tongue.
Yeah. No, it should be more bunched. So if you imagine like a spring pulled back before it released. So it's almost like pushed back. So your tongue isn't flat. It's like the tip is pushed back and up. Does that make sense? If it's pushed back, bunched up, like 即係縮埋一嚿咁樣。The R is a hard one because there are different ways to produce the R. You can also do one where your tongue goes from the bottom and sweeps upwards. So there's two ways to do R's. And like different people will do their R differently. And I think it's just whatever you're born doing. So some people do a better bunched R, some people do a better kind of sweeping R. The R is, oh, sorry, yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, so another question, you just finish it first. Yeah.
I was going to say the R is difficult because you're doing many things at once. This is the sound where you have to move your lip, your tongue, and breathe in a certain way. So it's quite complicated.
Do you find that Cantonese speaker that if they're learning English is actually a different kind of accent? So let's say it's a British accent or Aussie accent, it's actually easier in and like are they like halfway through?
I think it's all very similar. I don't know the Australian accent vowels well enough, but I think the hard sounds are all yeah, I think maybe British and Australian might be a bit easier because some of their R sounds are not pronounced. So it's ka. There's no R. It's not car. It's ka. So I can see how that could be a little bit easier. But it will only help if you lived in those places.
Gotcha.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, so another guy, one of the person asking, like, if they sing more English song, would they can help them to improve?
Yeah, if you want to, you mean a British accent or English sounds? Sorry.
Just in general for English.
So the question is like how to.
So the question is actually 多唱英文歌會唔會有幫助？
OK。應該嘅，覺得即係如果你多啲 practice 咧，應該好啲嘅。但係 as long as 你嗰啲 practice 咧唔係 negative practice， so what that means is 如果你啲音唔正咧 and you keep repeating that, then that might not be helpful because you're just repeating a wrong sound. But definitely that would help with your listening. So to distinguish the sounds clearly, I would make sure you're producing the sound clearly first before practicing in sentences, and that includes songs. We want to start off very small, not even a word like a syllable or just the sound. And sometimes even if you record yourself, if you have a good ear, you can record yourself reading a short paragraph and listen to see what sounds a little bit off to you. It might be hard to do if you're not a speech therapist because your ears are not trained, but it could be something worth a try.
Hi, I have a comment or a question. So I find a lot of Cantonese speakers, the reason why we feel that we have an accent is sometimes because we quote unquote overpronounce our unstressed sounds. So you know how, like, other than the stress sound, in most words that we say, the vowel sound kind of sound the same and it's kind of lazy. But when we were taught to speak when we were little, we would pronounce English like we do Chinese. So it's very 字正腔圓. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, definitely. That's a very good point. A Canadian or American English can be a bit lazy. So some of the vowel sounds, when they're unstressed, they all become the same sound sometimes. So for example, Canada, the can is stressed, but even though it's A, the two following syllables are still A, they just sound like So Canada. So yeah, in Cantonese, because the sound is, each word is usually a single syllable, then each word is emphasized with the same stress, just different tone, which makes it hard to translate into English. So that's very true. Most multisyllabic words will have one stress and then maybe one minor stress, but the rest becomes sort of this like short sound. So let's think of some words here. I just think of the word combination. So the last vowel, shen, is like combination. There, you can try it with some other words too. It's not going to work with all the vowels, but oftentimes it does shorten to this like lazy sound. Very true. Great point. Some other common lazy sounds would be, instead of really pronouncing the sound for the double T, like butter, it's not butter. In Canadian, it's butter. It's a little, almost like D sound, butter. Butterfly. And pretty is not pretty. You don't pronounce the T. Pretty, pretty, pretty. A lot of different specific little things that Canadian English is different from British accents.
So when do you think that like when so Cantonese speaker learning English, that is actually like if they learn how to 拼音 of the English word, would they help for them to like pronounce it more accurate?
I think it doesn't hurt. Yeah, I think that's helpful because then they understand the English equivalent a bit better. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, those vowels are so different though. The vowels are a bit harder to learn. But definitely easier in terms of your understanding of the alphabet and the sounds that associated with it.
Yeah, because it's just like, example, to myself personally, it's like when I pronounce my name Marco, some people from the States usually just hear Michael. And
okay, yeah.
And in here, usually when they spell it, it's M-A-R-K-O instead of M-A-R-C-O.
Oh, okay, that's funny. Yeah, I think, yeah, it's so interchangeable. Interesting. So in the States, they hear Michael, but here they do hear Marco.
Some people still hear Michael as well. So I'm not sure. This is actually my accent to pronounce it is actually in a way as well.
Oh, Marco. Marco. Yeah, I think maybe it's a bit of the vowel, and the R.
Marco.
Did you grow up learning British accent?
Some, yes.
Okay, so maybe that's why. Because British would be Marco. 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 Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe that R just needs to be pronounced a bit more.
Gotcha. 會唔會仲有其他街坊想問問題嘅？可以自己 unmute 自己發問嘅喎，或者譬如有咩字啊，或者其他practice 想試嘅話，都可以 unmute 自己，跟住我哋就可以去探討下。So Lilian, how often you do those classes for like this speech for like Cantonese speaker for or let's say what like the major problem right now you see from like let's say newcomers from Hong Kong, and what kind of like struggling they with in English?
I mostly, because I work full time at the hospital, I don't see too many clients on the side, maybe like one or two. And right now, I think mostly the clients that come in are like professionals who need to do like presentations or use their communication daily for a living. Then those are usually the people who want accent modification. People who are not in jobs that require that, and it's not impacting their social life and their daily life is fine, then usually it's really not necessary. But it's all depending on your comfort level and what your personal goals are. But oftentimes people get by fine with their accent. We all have a bit of an accent anyway. So as long as it's not too frustrating for people to understand you, it's definitely not a huge issue. So yeah, it's mostly for people who specifically work in a job where they need to present and communicate. But yeah, I don't typically hold any classes, but I think there are, like if you are interested, I know some people who might be taking on clients. I get so busy that I don't take on more than one or two.
Sorry, so could you perhaps share like how we can practice on our own?
Yeah. So it is a bit hard when you don't have someone there to listen to you. So if you can record yourself, or if you have a friend who can help, that would be great. There are some books that you can borrow from the library. So I particularly like this book called Pronouncing American English. And let me just check who it's by here. I actually got some of the pictures from them. It's just loading here, but I think it's free online here. Let me just copy and paste into the chat. I like that book. It gives you a good overview for exercises and producing speech sounds clearly, and it goes through all the vowels, and it has really nice short information sessions for each sound. So that's a nice one. What else? I have, this is a nice one too. I'm going to post this that you guys can look at. This one is more for intonation. And the best part of this book is that it has a list of some of the most common words, like multisyllabic words in English, and what their stress pattern is like. So you can practice those. As long as you kind of learn and remember those, then it might help you with your accent, I guess. Because those are supposed to be the 100 most common words in English. And they're very clear, and there's all these stress patterns and exercises that you can practice in that one as well. So one is more for articulation, the top one, and the other one is more for stress and intonation. Hope that helps. There's some other exercises that you can do too with a speech therapist. Sometimes we do what is called minimal pairs. So basically, if you have two sounds that get mixed up often, then, for example, E and E, then you can think of some words that everything is the same except the E and the E. So create kind of a word list for yourself so you can train your tongue and practice. For example, it would be, I have to think of some words, beat and bet, meet and met, heat, pet, that sort of thing. So create a long list for yourself and then practice those words so that the only difference are those E and S sounds.
Do you find native speaker have some of the wording also struggling as well?
It might be if you not that often, to be honest. Sometimes if you are very anxious about your accent, then it could cause you to tense up in terms of your muscles in your mouth and your tongue, which then when you do try to move it, it becomes a stutter because it's stuck, it's tense. So that would be really the only reason. Otherwise, not that often, no.
I see. Yeah, because I mean, I've been learning English for English is not my first language, so I mean, I learned it as well. And
Yeah.
learning about 20 years, and some of the wording I still have a struggling with, especially free, free and sound.
Yeah.
That's wording I still struggling with it a lot.
Yeah, that's a really hard one. It's both the th, and then the r. So you really have to move your tongue fast. So try practicing them separately. And then once they're perfect separately, then you can put them together. 3, and go slow, really slow. Like you can say 3.
I know someone who practice too much for the R sound and they add R into everything that is not supposed to be there. So for example, Jessica, they will pronounce as Jessica, and China. And sometimes when I am I'm a bit nervous, I may do that too. I think that might be some issue that Hong Kong people may have.
Overdoing it a little bit.
Yeah.
I haven't come across that before, but I guess people get hung up on the R. I know the R is very hard, but then you also have to practice the other vowels too. Unfortunately, I guess they got the hard part, but all the rest of the accent has not been worked on. That's unfortunate. I haven't seen that before though.
Do you also find Cantonese speakers when they're speaking in English, when they tend to speak really fast in English?
Yeah, or I think they want to speak at the same rate as they normally do in Cantonese, but your tongue is not as coordinated in another language, so it can't catch up. So then it becomes a little bit more jumbled. So I think it's just practicing being proficient in the speech sounds before you can kind of race to your regular speed of talking, which is really hard to do because we all naturally talk at a certain speed. So to have to slow down is not an easy task, but it will definitely make you more clear if that's your issue.
So 會唔會有街坊想問問題嘅？
So can you tell us again how you can become a speech therapist in Vancouver?
Yeah, so if you want to go into speech therapy, there's in BC, there's only UBC who has the SLP school. Basically, it's a Master's of Science, and you do have to take a lot of linguistic courses. I think it's speech sciences courses now. So that's like a combination of psychology, some anatomy, and then some linguistics all together. And then you'll have to apply for the master's. I think it's expanded in its class now to about, I think possibly 40 seats. So it's a bit bigger. Definitely there are other schools throughout Canada, like Alberta would be, oh, sorry, not Alberta, Edmonton, I think is the only one in Alberta, as far as I know. And then there's some more schools in Ontario. And then usually, I I think Ontario has the most schools, but usually it's a single school per province that has this program. So it's a very small, like, niche field. Yeah. Are you interested in becoming a speech therapist?
No, it was just something someone was asking, but yeah, but you know, as a career, like, do you think it's a good career to go into, or are there like jobs available?
Oh, there are plenty of jobs available, at least in if you're working with adults, definitely. It's really fulfilling because you're really just helping many people. So I really enjoy it myself. It does get quite busy, so you'll have to be a good multitasker, but yeah, there are always jobs available. Our population is aging and growing, so it's a good field to be in. It's definitely a newer field, so there are a lot of opportunities for research as well as work in general. Yeah. And I'm a little biased, of course. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe
No problem.
our newcomers could consider.
Yeah. Yeah. Great to, if you can like get some volunteering under your belt, then it's a great way to explore to see if you even want to work in this field. And if you do, then you also do need a lot of volunteer experience in order to even apply. So.
I see. Well, where would you volunteer? Like at the hospital or like at Sunny Hill?
I volunteered through GF Strong.
Yeah.
So there's a speech therapist that I helped there. I think there, even if you worked in something like behavioral intervention, then you can work with, you know, kids with autism or kids with special needs. And depending on what your interest is. Sorry.
Oh, I think it was just someone who's not muted. Yeah, please. Okay, so at Jeff Strong. Yeah.
會唔會仲有街坊想問問題嘅？咁如果冇嘅話啦，咁我哋不如今日就去到呢度啦，都點幾啦，咁所有嘅時間啦。咁 thank you 晒各位啦，I appreciate the Lilian come over today, to have a talk with us.
Thank you so much.
咁如果遲咗入嚟嘅街坊啦，我哋其實咧喺 YouTube 入邊呢個 talk 咧都有翻可以重溫嘅，可以睇翻嘅之後。咁講翻之後嘅活動啦，6月20號咧8點鐘咧，我哋咧都會請嚟咧由香港流亡去北美生活嘅年輕政治人物啦，梁頌恆同埋呢個周樹峰嘅，大家分享下佢哋喺北美嘅生活嘅，有興趣嘅街坊咧記得唔好錯過啦。咁今日我哋就去到呢度啦，各位晚安啦 ，Thank you Lilian again.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.